What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. With protectionism coming back in style, I knew I wanted to hop on and really remind people of this relative golden age of peace and prosperity the world has experienced from the last 100 years. You could say 80 years from market liberalization in trade and commerce. Now, it has not been shared equally, but it has been shared. And there are many nations through peace in trade and commerce that have done exceptionally well. And so it strikes me when I see that American president. And by the way, America was the nation that facilitated this global market neoliberalism, facilitated this global liberal marketplace. It is America that espoused trade. It is America that partnered with China to bring it out of its poverty and open up its markets to Germany and Japan, a peaceful Germany and Japan, I mind you. And I think people forgot how bad it can get out there in the world because it's only a matter of time before economic competition turns into militaristic competition. And you can't believe you're going to have barriers to trade, high tariffs, and there's not going to be any proliferation of nuclear weapons. As markets become closed and nations realize that the only way that they can grow their economy is not through peaceful trade, but through basically conquering overtly or covertly other nations to gain access to their resources and markets, countries will do such a thing. So the fact that we're living in a world where I don't think was the current global system perfect, absolutely not. But in contrast, in comparison to what we had before, multiple world wars, dropping of atomic bombs, imperialism, colonization. This is what the world looks like when you take away market liberalism and fair trade. And I don't want to say fair trade, but we can say free trade because you got to remember it all comes down. This is free trade. Market liberalization is the ally of the small man. Tariffs, protective markets. This is the ally of big government. And you can see that the world is kind of devolving into this authoritarianism. And it's unfortunate because we're trying to carve up the world into spheres of influence, so basically fiefdoms, where you have large countries such as Russia or China or America basically asserts its will in this region. And truthfully, in that game, America will lose because America pales in comparison to the resources that could be harnessed by Eurasia and Africa. And this was a great understanding of the geopolitical leaders of the past. And I thought the current administration had a plan, but you can see by the way how quickly they pulled back from the tariffs, they really didn't have a plan. Somebody said something and sounded good, and they tried to implement it. And they really had no real fundamental understanding of how interconnected, in a good way, global markets are. There is no reason why Americans should be making low quality products when there are so many countries looking to sell anything with the labor and skill set to do it. And America can come in and still be the leader of innovation, which it is. As I said, America just brought back a 10,000-year-old extinct species. Of what America does, the type of where it operates on the balance of trade is on a high end value spectrum. These are things you can't. And America has a great immigration system that facilitates this, where it welcomes the best and the brightest. But this everybody can play catch up, right? Very few countries have the ability to lead, and this is what America has shown it has the ability to do. So I'm really shocked by this era of protectionism, the idea that tariffs are somehow going to bring back jobs. All it's going to do, any economist will tell you, it's just going to create a tax, or basically a price premium for the consumer. It's going to create inflation, and it's going to protect and subsidize poor performing businesses. Instead of letting people in the world find these opportunities, and then they can go to fill those opportunities as it suits them, as well as from a manufacturing point of view, or Americans from a consumer point of view. Remember, nobody's forcing Americans to buy anything. And Americans have benefited greatly from affordable goods, which allows them to practice optimum resource allocation. So the fact that people believe that with higher prices, it's going to be good for the everyday American is wrong. Not only that, but America has plenty of surpluses that it cannot consume, that fair trade or open trade will benefit, i.e. agricultural goods. In a high tariff environment, all it's going to do is basically create an opportunity for substitutes. America will become isolated, and then other countries will rise in prominence, become basically its competitor. And you're seeing that right now with China's already shopping for goods in Brazil. Argentina and Brazil has already basically acted in this role before as agricultural exports. But now with American regime being so finicky and so volatile, this is forcing allies or trade partners to find more stable, beneficial relationships. Not only that, but as you see this authoritarianism, China is now going into Southeast Asia, seeking to expand its tentacles. You see Russia slowly dissecting Ukraine with no mercy. This is might is right at this point of the game. And then you have America basically just in Panama, basically just got a new deal to basically staff bases with troops. So indirects, and it's the first time American troops been in Panama in this capacity since before the year 2000, since 1999. And on top of that, El Salvador, which is really an interesting situation, because I believe half of what I hear come out that place, let they tell you, is some Cinderella story and just crime stopped overnight. But El Salvador has clamped down on the gangs, and in doing so, they have created some of the most, how should I say, fortified facilities of imprisonment. And slowly but surely, as President Bukele is from El Salvador, is visiting President Trump now, and President Trump are making pseudo jokes about imprisoning U.S. citizens, but El Salvador is basically turning into a U.S. penal colony. They've already deported one wrong person already that they're trying to get free and get back to the States because of the current immigration policy. It was heavy handed, and this is all byproducts of authoritarianism, and this all facilitate the power of the state. And I say this as basically a tale of caution that, okay, these things sound interesting, they sound novel, but this is not what it is. In fact, this fiefdom behavior is feudalism. This has been prevalent throughout history, and what has separated the great economies is that market liberalism, in that Dutch, you could say Judeo-Dutch Anglo tradition of global trade, opening markets, exchanging goods in an optimal way. This has been a great boon to global society as a whole. It has brought many of nations out of relative poverty and spread education, resources. It has basically evened out the supply demand imbalances of the world, relatively speaking. Is it perfect? No, but people aren't perfect. And this market liberalism has been one of the greatest contributors to the growth and economic development of the everyday person. So it's going to be interesting to see how the world evolve and change up. But let it be known, the more economic controls that are put in place, the more social controls are put in place. As Milton Friedman, who I always revered as an economist in many ways, not that he was right all the time or perfect, but he was able to ground so many philosophical thought into actual returns and actual cost benefits from a person's daily life. So when you look at, he talks about dictatorships, and they ask him, well, they were using the example of Pinochet. They always want to say Pinochet. Pinochet, of all the dictatorial leaders, Pinochet, he doesn't rank. He doesn't rank as far as some of the heinous things, especially from communism. Especially with communism, like you're talking tens of millions. Pinochet, unfortunately, has a reputation for oppressing thousands of Chileans. But when you see tens of millions of what socialism and communism, how they have oppressed many in their own society, by the way, because as I said, it empowers the state, and the state does not negotiate. What you'll see is that market liberalization has been great. And what he says, like, yes, you may have Milton Friedman, what he says is, you may have a few countries out there that you feel are heavy-handed, and they do have free markets, or they have relatively open markets. But what he says, not that everywhere you go that you have democracy, you'll have open markets, right? But he says, everywhere you go, you will have open markets, you'll have democracies. Because when you have those open markets, it empowers people, and people are going to want to manifest that power and their form of social living and government structure. So just be aware of that and understand that economic freedom is one with social and political freedom. As you experience one, you will experience the other in correlation. So those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts as we're battling out this, but I would believe this old 20th, 19th century argument of market liberalism versus protective markets. So I'd love to hear your thoughts right below. Comment below if you have any thoughts. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.